if we don't have the economic perspective to it, then we don't really have the long-term solutions that we need to create a sustainable future.
Yuri Gagarin was the first human being who was able to see the Earth from the space perspective, and he said, "I see the Earth and it's beautiful." And I was wondering if he recognized that the Earth is also not an infinity and that everything we use is limited.
So the current linear economy system is completely unsustainable because we are relying on endless growth and limited resources, which is simply not possible.
Economic sustainability refers to practices and economic development that support long-term economic growth without having negative consequences for ecological or social sustainability. An increase in economic capital must therefore not be at the expense of a reduction in natural or social capital. We must use, safeguard and sustain resources by optimal use, recovery and recycling. The definition that has been allowed to exist for decades equates economic sustainability with simply economic growth, considered sustainable as long as the total amount of capital increases. An increase in economic capital can, according to this definition, be allowed to happen at the expense of a reduction in other assets such as natural resources, ecosystem services, or welfare. Now, which one of these definitions do you think we should be adapting? The first one. An important difference between economic sustainability and ecological and social sustainability is that the economic structures are created by us. The laws of economics are a choice, and we can choose to mold the economic system to support and not work against nature and people.
You know what I don't appreciate? I don't appreciate when sustainable development turns almost the opposite to economic growth. Like, for me, the definition of sustainable development is actually, it allows us to have economic planning that foster economic growth without hurting the environment or kind of exploit it for future generations. That, for me, is the most important definition also of sustainability, because if we don't have the economic perspective to it, then we don't really have the long-term solutions that we need to create a sustainable future.
What is clear is that most of us do not want to move back to the caves, but we do want the benefits of social justice, education, health, wellness, and different kinds of opportunities. We want to eat food, we want to have a roof over our heads, electricity, and running water. And circular economy enables us to exchange these goods and services while also considering the borders of nature and designing this economy around it, designing this economy around nature. So the current linear economy system is completely unsustainable because we are relying on endless growth and limited resources, which is simply not possible. But with a circular economy, actually cycling materials creates 36 more jobs per 10,000 tons of recycled resources.
One of my favorite things to do is actually to get up really high in a building like this and just watch the view. Because I like to dream about what a city center would look like, how it would look differently if they weren't allowed to produce any waste in all this area. How would the city look different? And what really happens when we don't imagine that we will produce any waste at all? End of life doesn't exist. We only have beginning of life in our city. I really think adopting a more circular economy is a way of doing that as a system transition approach. Because also when we have a more circular economic system, we turn so much closer to nature, to being part of an ecological system where waste doesn't really exist as a concept. Everything is just renewed or reused all the time, part in an energy system.
So let me show you a few examples of circular economy. I recently bought Pokeballs in reusable deposit boxes. The company bought them themselves and you can return them and you get your deposit back, and this way they actually save money and I also create less waste, and they too. Another example is of a company called ReGeneration that I'm also part of. And these are circular deposit boxes that you can return to restaurants that are part of the program. You pay the deposit, you get your food in it, and upon returning the product, you actually get the deposit back.
I just came up with an idea that I don't think I have shared with you guys yet. And that is like the idea of how reuse or circular economy can be very profitable is, for example, in reuse of construction waste or demolition waste, really, to see it as resources instead. Because what happens then within the project is that instead of the entrepreneur paying to give away the waste, the entrepreneur actually gets paid for someone to just come and pick it up at the construction site. So I think that's a brilliant example of how circular economy can also be profitable and also be part of economic growth, and that economic growth and sustainability can be hand in hand and not be the opposite of each other.
And I want to share some thoughts about economics and the space. Yuri Gagarin was the first human being who was able to see the Earth from the space perspective, and he said, "I see the Earth and it's beautiful." And I was wondering if he recognized that the Earth is also not an infinity and that everything we use is limited. And also I was wondering why the definition of economics is the management of the scarcity of goods, instead the management of the finiteness of resources. It's up to us to change this and to make pressure to the decision makers of our planet and to convince them to make the better decisions and to redefine the way of our life for a future planet.
Today I wanted to talk about a word that I discovered a couple of years ago, but it had really helped me with my understanding the correlation between economic growth and sustainability. So it's basically, instead of calling myself a consumer, I call myself a circulant. And a circulant is a word coined by Alexandra Davidsson in Sweden. And this word helped me a lot because it made me realize that when I'm a circulant, I reuse, repair, and reduce the things that I consume. But it totally shifted all. Now I know exactly how to behave and how to consume sustainable, because I don't see myself as a consumer, more like a user of a service, of a product. So I prefer renting, for example, instead of owning. And this is it, guys, because shifting from ownership to access is one of the key elements in turning a linear economy to a more circular economy. And that's a perfect example on how economic development and sustainable development is the same thing. Also just wanted to clarify that I don't disagree with environmental activism. I think that's a great thing. I think it can be a very strategic tool to change regulations and laws that help us create a more sustainable society. But I think we can use it more strategic as well. And that it's not the only solution, but that it's also important to create profitable solutions that people can buy and flourish in, so that companies don't get stuck in this belief that sustainability is something that is expensive and complex and not something that they can earn money on, which they totally can, especially in a more circular economy.
Circular economy can create more job opportunities, more entrepreneurship opportunities, can save money for the company, can create more economic opportunities, can be a way to market your products, and it is also a way to tackle waste and pollution. And this is a crucial reason why we must move towards a circular economy and why it's important to talk about it.
We need to move away from business as usual and this idea that profit goes before everything else, that profit should be allowed to be made upon the backs of people and the exploitation of nature. I often hear people saying that risk-taking and hard work should result in wealth and profit. But if hard work and risk-taking should result in wealth, then why aren't women in Africa millionaires? There's obviously something in the system that creates these inequalities and that exploits nature. And we have to address this. We have to remold the economic system to work for people and nature.